Longinus here. Today we review a Hefeweizen and discuss a 19th century English novella.
Hello and welcome to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Good evening, Pigweed.
Good evening, Crowhill.
What's on your mind?
Well, the Eloi and the Morlocks.
The Eloi and the... I see. It must be time for a shortcut to the classics.
Yes, it is,
All
where
right.
we read great books by the world's great authors, provided that they aren't too long.
Yes, and this one is just under 100, or just over 100 pages, and it is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells.
Oh, well, isn't that fun?
Yeah.
And we have
Nice
our
and thin, isn't it?
literary contributor.
And Longinus is here.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Cheers, and let's have a sip of Furious George.
Yes. Furious George, and it's, of course, named after Curious George, the kid's book. Hefeweizen, and he's holding a banana. Why is he holding a banana?
Is because they say that the Hefeweizen yeast gives off clove and banana notes, is what
I'm getting clove and banana.
the general, yeah?
Yeah. Yes.
Did you get any of that there, Longinus? Did you get it? Was it clovey and or banana-y?
I get a wee bit of both.
Yeah, me too. It's not... You know, the funny thing is, did you know that right around the time when we were kids, they shifted the type of banana that we ate in the United States?
We don't have... There's not a whole lot of banana variety going on.
No, there is. But across the world...
Right, no, I mean, when you go to the grocery store, it's like banana.
It's exactly. And if you go elsewhere in the world, there's like 45 different kinds of bananas on this island here.
Right.
But we always eat just one banana.
Right.
For some crazy agricultural reason. But the problem is that the bananas are all clones.
Right.
So once a parasite gets into them or something, it's just a matter of time before it wipes out all the bananas. Well, that happened when we were kids. And they shifted from one banana to another.
Oh, okay.
So apparently a lot of the things that we think of as banana flavor is from the old banana, not the new banana.
But we didn't say, hey, we need to have more banana varieties. We just
went to some other clone. Yes, I don't know why, because I remember I was down in St.
all
Lucia.
the tomatoes that you can get and the peppers you can, but bananas are just a banana.
But there's all kinds of different ones, which is strange. But anyway, so
Mexico they have really small ones, and then they have the plantains, which really aren't this bananas.
But they got the purple ones and yellow ones. And the
there's
red
all kinds of varieties
and
interesting things. One thing this Furious George says, aggressively fermented German wheat beer. What does aggressively fermented mean?
They're all it's always kind of aggressive. There's always kind of a lot of churning and bubbling going on, and if it isn't, then it's party.
I think when they were fermenting, they just played death metal.
And that's what made George so mad.
That's why he's so mad. Why are you playing that horrible music?
I hate metal.
Yeah. Okay, Furious George, very good. It's actually pretty much what I would expect from a Hefeweizen. Very, very tasty.
Yeah, nice German Hefe style from right down the street here in Maryland.
Yes. All right, so the Time Machine. What are we doing here?
Well, tell me a few things about H.G. Herbert George.
Yes. And so seminal science fiction writer, this first novella published in 1895.
He hit it out of the ballpark with his first four the four ones that you know of came in 4 consecutive years. You had Time Machine, Dr. Moreau, Invisible Man, and War of the Worlds.
Wow.
One after the other.
And I've read 3 of those. I don't think I've ever read Dr. Moreau.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one and that one's heavy, right? Yeah. It's cross species.
Okay, I don't know that one.
Where he's experimenting on people by injecting animal genes. And there are a bunch of, so there's a bunch of pig mutants. So there's all kinds of human cross,
This is
which is an interesting time.
It was a time of ferment in the science world because people were thinking of all kinds of crazy new things. There were all these new sciences that were developed. Darwin was only a little bit before this, and then we've got advances in biology. We've got advances in in chemistry. We've got advances in physics. All this stuff going on at the same time. So it captured people's imagination about what could be done and what kind of interesting things could
people
happen.
were getting a little more sciencey. Now, when you think of Wells, you also think of Verne.
Yeah.
But Verne was 30 years prior.
Right.
And you think of Verne, you get Journey to the Center of the Earth,
Right.
and
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
right,
that's
right,
the one I
Around the
always
World in
think
80
of.
Days.
Yeah.
So they had different styles, different approaches. I think Wells had a little more of a social aspect to it, but these guys were into science. And
Now, you know who really liked Jules Verne?
who?
Doc Brown in Back to the Future. He was really
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Right, and so the ideas of time travel.
Right.
I don't know if Verne did any time travel, or if anybody had.
I don't know of any. Did he do any time travel?
I don't know if he did any time travel. My question was, did anybody write a story about time travel
Oh, is this
prior to H.G. Wells?
That's very
I don't know
interesting.
of any.
That's an interesting question. If anybody did anybody write it? Okay, so
Wait,
that's
hold
a
on.
question for the audience here.
What was Yankee in King Arthur's?
Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. That was
That was Twain, and that was
That was Mark
probably about that time, maybe a little early.
huh. Okay, that's a fascinating question. When was the first time travel story?
All right, and Wells he went to a little bit of science, not exactly how this machine,
Yeah, exactly. We don't know anything about how the machine
crystals
works,
or
yeah.
whatever made it work, but.
I love the mechanics of the machine, where now, everything's state of the art, where things aren't moving parts whatsoever. But the whole thing was just a machine,
Yeah,
with
I know.
levers and,
Right.
and ball bearings. and
Whizzed and wingled. What's that? There's this weird song. And
Yeah.
the machine that does all these crazy things. But anyway, yeah. So do you want to go through the plot, or what?
So let's plow through the plot. It should only take us a few minutes, and then we'll come back and do some commentary and analysis. And so we have an unnamed first-person narrator,
right.
and a group of guys who also don't have names get together at the time traveler's house every Thursday or something like that.
You get the impression of like a bunch of educated, sciencey kind of guys.
You got the editor, the psychologist, the medical man, the provincial mayor, and then Philby. I don't know, some reason Philby gets a name.
Right, and you get the impression that these are all kind of the classic view of the arrogant 19th century scientist who thinks he knows everything.
Yes, you're right.
You get kind of it's a very I get a very stereotypical feel out of these guys.
Of the Victorian, overconfident
Victorian scientist who thinks
scientist.
he knows more than he really knows. Yeah.
But he comes out and he brings a clock-sized machine that he says is a time machine.
Yeah.
And what? It disappears?
Yeah, so he sends it into the future, which makes it disappear. But I don't understand. The one thing I didn't get about this, maybe we should save this for later, but one thing why didn't he just send it 1 minute into the future so they could see it reappear again? I don't know.
Right.
But-
And he said, hey, oh, by the way, I have a full-size one back in my workshop,
That's
and I'm thinking about getting in it.
This thing just disappeared, and there's another one. I'm going to get in that one.
And I guess that right after they leave, he does.
Not right after they leave. So it's every Thursday. So it's a week later when they're getting together again, and it's the morning of that day when he gets in the time machine and goes on his journey.
Because he
Okay.
can come back anytime he wants.
Well,
so
true.
He
but yeah.
could have gone 18 years, and then he
I see.
come back.
I thought since he was gone like 8 days that it was also 8 days London time.
Oh,
but
no.
it could. But like your Longinus is saying, it didn't.
When you have
it
a
didn't
time
matter.
machine, you've got all the time in the world.
Quite literally, all the time
in the world.
In the world. And I don't know. Does he choose this date, or does this thing just? This is a dry run, and he doesn't really know how the thing works.
Well, the dry run. That's funny. The dry run was he sits into the thing, and he just bumps the controls a little bit.
And sees it's made zipping by.
Yeah, it goes he only goes 5 hours into the future, right, on his first run, and then he realizes, okay, that's kind of cool, and then he sort of leans on the controls and goes into
800,000
802,701 AD. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I'm glad that they're still using AD in 802,701.
So after he does that, and he goes 8,000 some years into
wait a
the
minute.
future.
Actually, should we explain how we got there? Because from the narrative structure, what happens is they have the first meeting on a Thursday, and then they come back a week later for the second meeting on a Thursday, and they show up and the time traveler isn't even there, right?
Right.
And so they're like, what's going on? And they come in and they start, trying to work on dinner. And
he
all that
staggers
kind of
into the room.
Yeah. Then he staggers into the room, and his clothes are all messed up. He's bleeding. Doesn't have any shoes. He's a total disaster.
But he's hungry.
But he's very hungry and wants a drink.
And wants some meat.
Right.
Yes, he wants some meat.
He wants some meat, but he says, all right, let me go clean up. Come back. When I come back, I'm going to tell you the story, but I want to tell it uninterrupted. So like the narrator only gets a couple of pages, and then the entire thing is in quotes from beginning to end while he tells the story, and then until he returns. So,
sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. So what is all right? Give me Longinus. Give me his impression of when he lands in the year 802,701.
One of the things we should also say, he lands in the exact same space where the time machine is. The machine doesn't move in space. It only moves in time. So it's 800,000 years in the future to where his house was.
Right. In London, yes.
Right. So he shows up and he gets out there and he kind of lands in a nice little sort of pasture area.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Next to some really nice buildings.
Now, isn't there a thunderstorm when he first arrives and it passes quickly or something like that? But you're right. It's a very lovely place, and he sees these beautiful buildings and he sees these beautiful fields.
And as you would expect, nothing recognizable. I mean, it's 800,000 years. I mean,
right. So he shows up and and he gets off and he starts to sort of wander around, and then I think the next thing that happens is he meets some. I wouldn't call them humans, but he meets
4 foot tall humanoid kind of a thing.
So which we find out. I don't know if they call them. I guess he figures out that they call themselves the Eloi, and they have an unrecognizable language. And yes, and they're human, mostly-ish.
Right.
They're 4 feet tall,
and they're just sweet and innocent. It's like what. Maybe some people would think that we were like in the Garden of Eden, just living a very peaceful, loving, joyous life. I won't say loving because they don't know what love is, but a joyous life.
Yes, they are kind of androgynous, wearing similar flowing tunics. They only eat fruit. There's no. They
don't do any work.
There's no evidence of toil or labor or conflict or anything, and they're kind of simple.
Yeah, there develops one thing, which is they really don't like it when there's no moon.
Oh yeah,
right. Yes, we'll get to that. But yeah, they're gentle and kind, and they eat fruit all the time, and they're always happy and
they kind of frolic around, and he learns the language, which he says, as far as I can tell, it's just like simple verbs and simple nouns. Like there's not even any abstract thought or abstract language of any kind.
He learns the language and then realizes that they're not very good to talk to anyway.
They're just frolicking around in the river, and then one of them starts to float down river, and nobody's really particularly concerned. They're about to.
That's pretty weird. It's a weird scene.
And he jumps in and saves one that he assumes is female, but he's kind of not 100% sure. Weena.
Right. Weena, right. And before that happens, he's out there exploring the area, and he comes back and he notices that the time machine's gone.
Right.
Well, yes, that's right. This is very, very early on. Yes, good point.
On the first day that he's there, the time machine is missing. So the whole thing about learning their language and realizing there's not much to talk about reminds me of this Far Side cartoon, where this guy finally perfects his machine for understanding the language of dogs. and he goes out in the neighborhood, and all the dogs are saying, "Hey, hey, hey!"
Yeah.
Probably. They're not like reciting poetry or anything. Yeah. So yeah, the time machine is gone, and he kind of freaks out. Now he did take one precaution, which was pretty smart. When he landed, and he was going to leave the time machine, he unscrewed the dials or removed them in some way so that nobody could take the time machine away, and then he'd be stuck there. So, but he didn't physically secure the thing.
No, right. So he's got these levers in his pockets, which they found kind of weird that he has pockets. And then nightfall. So they're in what is the architecture like? What are they have like these big
communal houses,
cathedral-y.
But it's like sort of dilapidated.
Well, that's the other thing. So it's futuristic, but it's showing some wear and tear.
Right. Yeah.
As if it's on the decline a little bit.
Yes.
And so he notices that, and he notices that they don't break off into, they don't have separate houses or separate rooms or anything. Everybody's just sort of lounging around and pillows and whatever, and they're all kind of sleep together.
It's like a big college party without the beer.
Or stimulating conversation.
That's right. And the weird thing is he starts to notice, how do these people have clothes and food? Because they don't seem to do any work. Somebody had to make these clothes.
But, so all right. So here's the speculation, and then he makes his first observation, which we'll get to later. But where do we get the Morlocks?
Well, isn't the first occurrence is he sees some white ape-like thing run by during the day, like just briefly something runs by.
Yes, and he's out exploring, and he sees in the depth of his shadow, these bright red eyes looking at him, and then that's the ape that runs by him, or the ape-like figure, or the humanoid figure, whatever you want to call the Morlock.
Right. Yeah. And then he finds out later on about these shafts that go down into the ground, and he starts
because there's some machinery that's sucking the air down.
Yes.
So there is some machinery. We got that. Then these Morlocks. Now he realizes that man over this time has split into two versions of man.
Yeah.
Right.
And we get this weird sort of communist speculation about where the upper class becomes less and less connected to work, and the lower class, the workers, they go underground and they become more and more connected to work. And then the interesting thing that he says is that intelligence requires challenge, and since the upper class, which is the Eloi, have no challenge, they become stupid.
Yeah, right. Well, hold on. You're exactly right, but he figures. Oh, so wait, the first thing he sees is this giant white sphinx. Looks like a sphinx on a bronze pedestal.
Right.
Sphinx with its wings outspread, right? And he just is looking around, going, "There's no other place for them to have stashed my."
But weren't there also like grooves in the grass or something? So he knew it had been dragged up to that thing.
That makes sense. So now he's like, "All right,
it's in there somewhere."
First off, number one priority, I got to get that time machine, or I'll be stuck here with these dopes."
Right.
And so he's like, maybe the time machine is down in these pits.
Right.
And so he goes down, and Weena's like, "You don't want to go down there."
She starts freaking out.
She's all,
She doesn't go.
After he saves her life from the river, she becomes his constant companion.
Yeah, she's with him all the time, and he's kind of glad to have her, and he has every intention of bringing her back with him, which would have been great in terms of establishing your story, which we'll find out.
Yeah. Meet this 4-foot-tall weird thing that I found.
We just call her Weena. Or which one?
Which is, if you look back in the young anthropologists in the 19th century, they would bring back, the pygmies.
They took American Indians back to Europe, yeah.
So,
well, why wouldn't they? So that's a great idea. So it goes down there, runs into them, and when he calls them lemurs, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. So white. I guess they're also about 4 feet tall. Same size, I guess. But big bug eyes for seeing in the dark. And white and hairy.
and he finds that they are totally scared of light. So,
and the only thing that we'll get to this too.
Yeah.
He has in his pocket some matches,
Some
matches. And they have so there's no electricity, there's no fire, right?
Right, no fire, yeah.
And so that's pretty fascinating and frightening.
Somehow London has become so temperate that nobody even needs to be warm in the wintertime up there, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So it's it's like everything has been so pre-engineered by previous civilizations,
right?
That the newest civilization, we don't even need any machines. We have the fruit is just right here. Anyway, so he sees that they are meat eaters. The Morlocks are meat eaters, while the Eloi are not.
But he doesn't quite recognize the cut of meat.
Right.
He does not recognize the cut of meat.
He wonders of where do they get their game.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. Yeah. And they start pawing at him and whatever, and he gets
pretty uncomfortable.
He gets the heck out of there.
Right. Barely. Because he has to climb. He climbs all the way.
Right?
Yeah, but he has to climb all the way back up, and it's quite a climb. And they're like always nipping at his heels on the way back up, and everything else. So it's.
But he sees a building off in the distance that he just feels he's got, because it's unlike any of the others.
It's like the Green Palace or something.
Yeah, so he feels like he needs to go check this out.
Yeah.
And he says, it looked like it was about 7 miles, and he guessed it was more like 15 miles by the time he gets there.
I know the feeling.
And he gets there.
It's like when you're paddling and you just want to. It's supposed to be just a couple of miles.
Right around the corner.
It takes you 3 hours.
It's not. Yeah. So he gets there and it's like a museum, and it's got all this stuff from the past. Fortunately, one of the things it has is more matches.
Right.
I'll talk about that, Wells. I mean,
yes,
so the only two things that have survived for 800,000 years
are
matches and some camphor. Is that what it is?
Right.
So, which is flammable.
Yeah.
So at least he's got that. And he can't even find any metal around this place.
He does find a crowbar.
So he finds a lever off of a machine that he snaps off, and he's like, well, all right, I got something resembling a club.
Yeah, because he wants a weapon, because he's afraid of the Morlocks.
He didn't bring anything. So...
And then there's like a whole series of calamities.
Because he's gone so far, he can't get back on the same day. So now he's got to stay overnight with no shelter.
And no moon, which means it's dark,
problem.
This is a bad time. That's when the Morlocks come out.
Right.
And he's got Weena to protect, so he tries to light a fire to keep the Morlocks away, and then he falls asleep and the fire goes out.
Yeah.
Right? And so he goes deeper into the forest, lights another fire, but apparently he wasn't a good Boy Scout and didn't put out his first fire. And that one starts a forest fire.
Yes.
And they end up on this mad chase trying to get away, and Weena gets captured by the Morlocks.
And he's clubbing Morlocks left and right, and then Weena doesn't survive the escape. He makes the escape, goes to the Sphinx, and lo and behold...
The door's open.
Yeah, the door's open. He's like, well, sweet.
And
look, just as I predicted, there it is. Yes. Time machine.
So he goes in. He thinks that he's triumphed, but the Morlocks think that, we've trapped him. Because
they close the doors.
They close the doors on him, and he's like, "These stupid people! I have a fourth dimension to go."
That's right. Yeah.
He has to screw on his levers, right?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
He does that, and
isn't there like a battle inside there? Like there's one.
Yeah, you're right. So he's kind of fighting them off as he's reassembling and trying to fire up his time machine.
Yeah.
And it fires up his time machine, and does he go back to London?
He goes forward in time.
Like 30 million years.
Yes.
And we'll get this to the analysis. Then he's like, all right, time to go home.
Right.
He makes it back and so he's telling the story, the narration of the book. He's telling the story, and everybody goes,
all right.
So that's your story, huh? But he has
one thing. He has a flower.
Yes, Weena had stuffed some flowers in his funny little pockets, and that's the only thing he was able to bring back from the future to tell his story. Nobody believes him, and then they come back the following weekend,
and he's gone.
And he's gone for good.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the story.
That's the story.
Yeah.
Now, back to the very beginning, his discussion of four-dimensional space.
Right.
Is that something that is going on in the physics world, where you don't just have. Is this the beginnings of space-time?
I think there had to be a lot of conversation around that concept.
I think there was a fourth, the talk of time as a fourth dimension.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was talk about sort of the space-time continuum or how they were related. It was just a dimension.
I think that's the right way to put it. Is that they recognized that there was a fourth dimension, and the way he explained it in the very beginning of the book is if you had a cube, a 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch cube, and it existed for 0 seconds, then it wouldn't really exist. It would just be a concept.
Right.
In order for it to exist, it has to exist in time.
Right.
It has to have duration.
Exactly.
Right.
So what he was talking about was everything has to exist in 3 dimensions plus this fourth dimension, the concept of duration. And that's how he was trying to explain that. And one of the things that was a little confusing to me is in the beginning when he's explaining all this stuff, I thought that he said that the time machine could travel through space and time, not just time.
I thought it was just...
right. Well, the way that he explained it, but the way that it actually worked...
The way that it actually worked, it just stayed in the same place.
It just stayed in the same place. And so he's just saying, okay, look, you can go left and right, forwards and backwards, up and down. And for it to exist, it has to exist in time. Then why can't you do that with time? Why can't you go forward and backward in time?
Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing that
it's probably pretty exciting idea at the time, right?
Yeah. Here's the thing that nobody ever seems to think about when they think about time travel, which is, okay, if I were to go back in time 1 minute from right here, well, the Earth has been spinning on its axis. It's been rotating around the sun. The sun has been traveling through the galaxy, right? So 1 minute ago, we were like 1,000 miles away.
Right. The entire solar system is moving through space.
Yeah. So when you go back in time, what guarantees that I'd be standing right here?
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Right. And
well,
that's a discussion
relativity.
For relativity.
I think we should do that one day.
I think we should do relativity one day. But I've always thought that was like a missing element in this whole time travel thing. Is, okay, just because you're going back in time, like right now we have a certain rotational momentum and all this other stuff going on. You go back in time, how's that going to work? So
right. Only if it adheres to the physics of us traveling through time, which means we don't feel the movement.
Right.
Then you would land in the same spot. But
it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
But why would it so?
And that's one of the criticisms of the time machine is there are so many.
Not this time machine. Just mean the idea of time machines.
Well, no, the book, The Time Machine.
Oh.
The one of the criticisms of it is there are so many paradoxes that are raised by time travel, and he doesn't really address them. And that's for later science fiction writers to get into, is a lot of these paradoxes.
And in a sense, I mean, if this was the first, or one of the first books on time travel, he sets it up in such a way that, now you can go to the DC universe, and they're always talking about multiverses and all that stuff. And they're really talking about it. But I think at this time, I thought it was pretty imaginative.
Yes, I agree. Right, he presented it in a short, cogent, plausible manner.
Yeah.
And then he ends up in the Morlocks, and his first theory is so in 1895, communism is in the air, but we don't see the Russian Revolution for another 20 years. Yeah. And so he's like, is this what egalitarianism, in a communistic way, like, did it actually succeed, and this is what we end up with?
Yeah, he's seeing the class struggle,
right,
and he's seeing the Eloi and the Morlocks in the context of this class struggle, and this is the result of this. I mean, look at 802,000. That's a heck of a long time.
It's a funny choice, but it becomes so egalitarian, so Well, so what he would say is the competitive drive of capitalism.
It only became
is a bad
egalitarian
thing.
for the Eloi. I mean, the Eloi became.
Well, but this is his first assessment.
Right.
He hasn't met the Morlocks yet.
Yes.
So what he's looking around, he's going, so we've solved all of society's ills and become so indolent and lazy and we just become dumb and dopey.
Right, we lost our meaning, we lost our drive,
and at this point,
there's no suffering. Now, there's no old people, and we don't know what happens to them. Well, we kind of might know.
At this point, we need to refer back to a previous shortcut to the classics, which is One Day in the Life of Ivan Ivanovich, or how do you ever say that? And where I think it's in that book where he says, if you could make humanity so that all they had to do was lounge around in hot tubs, eating cakes and screwing.
Yeah.
Then they would find some way to mess it up.
That's Underground, man.
Yeah.
That's Notes from Underground.
Right.
You're exactly right. That's
Notes
from Underground.
Exactly. They would just for spite,
just for something interesting, they would find a way.
Yeah. Right. So you would have to kind of be semi-brain dead, like these people, to enjoy that type of existence. Because
just
with our brains, we would just go mad.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, stop. All your material needs. So this is the healthy criticism of Marxism. Is that all we need to do is solve the problem of material want, and we'll be in paradise.
Right.
Well, this is what paradise looks like, and it's kind of dumb.
Yeah, exactly. So even if you could solve all that stuff, you could solve all the material money problems, and you just sit around thinking, this is boring.
Yes, you would just punch somebody in the face
just to see what would happen.
just to have some reaction.
Yes.
Just for God's sake.
Right, so that's Wells' criticism of communism, and then there is the Morlocks is Wells' criticism of unabated capitalism.
Yeah, right. Of an upper class and a lower class.
Yes,
so this upper class and lower class becomes literal.
Yes.
And these people get so over
on the surface and underground.
Yes. So in order to make things make things nice and beautiful, you take all the dirty industry and you put it underground.
Right.
And then you have a class of people who eventually just get used to it,
and they hate the light, and they become sort of blind, like blind fish in a cave in Kentucky. That sort of thing.
Right.
They become albinos who can't see very well, and they hate the light, and they just are always in the dark.
So he's like, all right, I'm backing off a little bit from my first theory. My second theory, now that I've discovered this second race, and he kind of updates his theory, like, that's why they don't have to toil up here. But as we mentioned earlier, it's not going. You can tell things are on the decline, right? The clothes are wearing out. It's kind of dirty and dusty, and so maybe this relationship isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, and I think that one of the central messages of the Time Machine is the inevitable decline of all civilizations.
Well, in the Time Machine, the relationship was that the Eloi is basically the Morlocks cattle.
Yes.
Well, then that's that. Well, so that's the third one.
Then we get back to the Then he sort of realizes, wait a minute, that
meat.
cut of meat that I saw. What was that? Yeah, and what's basically happening is the Morlocks are tending the Eloi like sheep, and letting them have their fruit and frolic and whatever, and then they just take one every once in a while.
Yes. Now, in terms of his. If we're going to say the first theory is a criticism of communism, the third theory is, at some point the underclass is going to rebel.
Yes.
And so now you have a certain sympathy with communism and with the dichotomy of the rich and the poor, and literally eating the rich. So I guess was there some point where the Eloi were providing food for the Morlocks, and then what?
I don't think so. I think the Morlocks were always the worker class who were providing. They were keeping the machinery running. They were making the clothing. They were building the buildings. They were doing all the work, providing them with everything. But eventually, it turned the Eloi, from the lack of any kind of challenge, just became stupid, like sheep. and then they became food for the Morlocks.
Right. Yeah. And then he sort of speculated about the repugnance of cannibalism, but under
somehow that we
under some sort somehow you get over that. Anyway, so I thought the book was going to be about him bouncing around through time, showing up in Egypt, going to the future, maybe going, and no. So it's almost 90% of the book is this one week event with and then when he escapes, he jams it in and goes to 30 million years.
And it's like all there are huge crabs. Right. Yeah,
but I thought it was interesting. Two different. He touches on the idea of tidal locking, which is what the reason that we see one side of the moon is because eventually gravity locks the planet, the moons to the planet. Well, if you go far enough, then the Earth gets locked to the sun, and so the Earth, is heated up on one side, just is scorching on one side. The other side's not getting any sun, and I thought that was a very scientifically progressive idea.
It was interesting. There was a lot of just speculation about what might happen in the future, and eventually everything's going to run out. But
so there's no life on the planet on land, really.
Well, there were the crabs.
You just had the crabs who could go in the water, and without, I don't know what happened to the moon because now the ocean was still.
Yeah, right.
I thought that was interesting, and then he jams it further into the future, and now
there's nothing. Everything's dead.
Well, now, no, but in terms of astronomy, when the sun burns out, it actually gets bigger, becomes a red giant in the end. So now there's really nothing except for some lichen. Even the crabs are gone.
Right. I think it's just slime or something.
Right. So the fact that they had an understanding of the life cycle of a star,
isn't that interesting?
I thought that was pretty.
That was pretty interesting back in 1895.
I would have thought that was a much more modern idea. So
I've got one thing I've got to ask you about. The idea that this guy gets into a time machine.
Here we go. I like it.
And was going to travel into the future and brings essentially nothing. He's like he doesn't have a backpack full of food. He doesn't have a gun. He doesn't have a flashlight.
If you're going to drive 100 miles on vacation, you have a tool bag in your car, and so in case you're
in case the time machine breaks down.
Well, I've got a toolbox in the back of my car.
Yeah, you wouldn't take one in the 800,000 years.
If you're going to go sometime in the future, aren't you going to bring I don't know how hot, maybe some extra clothes? It might be cold. It might be hot.
I thought this was I agree. I thought it was a little bit lazy on Wells's part to have first off, the only thing he brings is matches, and then lo and behold, the only thing he stumbles upon that is useful is more matches. It's this is kind of uncreative. You could have had if you had a tool bag of items that didn't exist during this time but existed in your time, and then one by one they became useful in a way in a different way than they were useful here, but I found a way to convert I don't know what, but it seems like as far as the creativity of the writing, it would have been a better story.
As a matter of fact, I was kind of thinking about this a little bit. If I was going to be in a time machine, I was going to travel to some indeterminate future, what would I bring? Right. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what it would be, but it would certainly be more than just some matches in my butt.
In a pipe.
Yeah, right.
Yes, you're right. You're a gun.
Might bring some books. A
gun, a knife, a pen and paper.
Right. A raincoat. I mean something.
Yeah, right. Change of clothes. He even said that his shoes wore out because those were just like his house shoes.
Yeah.
Really? You went on an adventure
and you didn't bring some hiking boots or anything serious at all. So I thought that was a little bit.
Was he just too excited and curious? And he decided, I'm going to jump on it right now. Boom.
Something like that. But I thought
that was kind of strange.
Yeah. So
the story uses time travel as a vehicle. Pardon the pun. For his other story, which is the
Social
Eloi
commentary.
and the
Yeah,
Morlocks and the
okay.
social commentary.
Right.
Yes, because
So,
he's seeing the upper crust getting soft
Yeah.
in Victorian.
Well, that actually is an interesting question. Is the primary purpose of this story to explore time travel, or is time travel simply a mechanism to try to expound on social commentary and where he thinks things
But I
are
don't
going?
think he went beat you over the head with it to the degree that you're like, oh God, I see what he's doing here.
I mean,
it's there.
It's there. There was a bunch of it, but it was. You're right. It wasn't very heavy-handed. It was just
Right, heavy-handed. Now I ran into. Are you telling me you guys have a better vocabulary than I do? I kept underlining words and putting question marks out in the column that I eventually looked up later.
Okay, right.
And we can even look at the pages if you care, but etiolated. Etiolated.
Yes. Yeah, that's a word I sort of vaguely know.
Listless and sickly.
Right.
So they're vegetarians, and he calls them frugivorous.
Yeah.
Which is fruit eating.
right.
Which I didn't know that, but I kind of
I know.
gathered it from the context.
Afterwards, I was like, man, it's like this. It's like, I don't know why. For some reason, leprous didn't mean anything to me. It's like of a resembling leprosy. I'm like, all right.
Well,
I guess
yeah,
I
knew that
guess
one,
I could have figured that out. Connubial.
Yeah, I sort of guessed that one.
Right.
From
So
conjugal and stuff,
it does kind of sound like that, plus the context. How about deliquesce?
Yeah, that one, I didn't know that one at all.
We had a D on deliquesce, and it's to become liquid by absorbing moisture from the air as certain salts, or to melt away.
Yeah, I didn't know that one.
How about as a geologist? Did you know steatite?
There are so many weird words in geology.
Right.
No, I did not know that one, but you wouldn't believe how many weird words there are.
Right,
in geology.
and the whole type kind of sounds like a stone anyway,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
a soapstone.
Okay.
The cicerone, which I thought, what is the name for a profession? The guy who knows so much about wine. What is it?
Right, yeah.
It's very close to that. And I'm like, well, that's not it, because it means a person who conducts, who's a guide or conducts sightseers.
Okay.
Now, I heard at least 4 times incontinently.
Yeah.
Incontinently. And I'm thinking of incontinence.
Right.
Right.
Which
can't hold your bowels or something.
And in a way, if you listen, it's immediately, at once, straight away.
Right.
So there's a relationship between
yes.
the two, but I only know it has to do with the,
Right. Yeah.
bladder and
Right.
such. Then on opposing pages, towards the end, he's surrounded by Morlocks. You can't really see him, but he can kind of hear them, and he calls it a slumberous murmur. And when I looked it up, they say slumberous, which has to do with slumber. So I don't know, a sleepy murmur.
I just thought of it as sort of gentle snoring.
Yeah. So some slumbers, and he used it twice on 2 pages. So I was just like, I mean, it sounds like a thing, right? Just sounds like a sound that is sort of a soft. Who maybe when all of them are speaking lowly at the same time, that you get a certain sound that comes that he called a slumberous murmur. All right, but here's the last thing I want to ask is, you get 2 passes.
Okay.
Are you going 800,000 years into the future? And remember, or you can go to the past too.
Okay.
But remember, you can't go to the Coliseum, because if you want to go to the past, you're going to be right here in Maryland.
Okay.
And I don't know how much is there to see.
Right.
I mean, I guess see Indians on the Chesapeake Bay.
800,000 years ago?
No, I mean, you could go anytime at all.
Okay.
So would you
I
even
see.
go to the past?
I see.
Or would you use your 2 tokens to go in the future? And I'm guessing you're not going 800,000 years.
No.
But it has to be right here in Maryland.
Right. I'm thinking, my first thought was, I don't know, like 25 years just to see how my kids and grandkids are doing, for one. And then the other, like 500 years to see if Western civilization is still around or something. Not sure I'm going 1,000,000 years.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just asking you guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I would not want to go to the end of the world. Right, which he did after the millions of years, and,
to see the planet die.
See,
You know, it's going to.
Yeah. It's like a Woody Allen sort of a thing to do, you know?
Right.
Isn't anybody
Well, that's
worried
right.
about the heat death of the universe? I mean, come on.
Well, Woody Allen had that movie Sleeper, right?
Yeah, that's funny. Yes, that's right.
It's where he woke up in the future and Smokey was healthy.
That's right. I think I would go back in time to before there were humans in Maryland. And I'd bring equipment with me. I'd bring a gun and a knife.
Although, like we were talking about, you're in the same space. You'd have to make sure that Maryland wasn't already covered by a mile of ice.
Oh, yeah, well, it wasn't.
Right?
Right. I would only go maybe 25,000 years ago. So at that point, no, it wasn't covered by ice.
Right.
So, yeah.
But what I'm saying is you could, or I guess you could make sure that you just didn't appear inside of a tree. But let's just say that you could account for that.
How do you, even if you're in the same location, how do you know what that location
That's
is?
right. You don't.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I'd like to do that. And then,
so you're just checking out foliage and animals, and
I think it would be kind of interesting to see.
Yeah.
But then going forward, I'd like to.
So no humans, though. Because 25,000 years was
pre-humans in North America.
So you just have
and then going forward,
Yeah.
I'd probably like to see maybe 200 years in the future, kind of to see what happened with Western civilization. Did we ever figure this stuff out, or
did we blow ourselves up?
Did it all collapse, and did the world turn into a catastrophe? I don't know.
Somebody finally dropped the bomb.
Yeah.
Right. What about you, Longinus? How far are you going into the future? 5,000 years or anything like that?
No. I'm terrified to go in the future. I don't know if I want to know.
Right.
Yeah.
But it would be maybe 100 years, 200 years to see what was happening in Baltimore, and going in the past. If I had to stay in the Baltimore area, I think I would go back to maybe
Civil War or something like that.
Well, I think I would want to go back and see what Baltimore was like in the 1750s, 1760s.
Wow.
Okay, so colonial,
right?
But you're not going
I take a lot of notes and then come back and write the.
There you go. That's
and correct all the misconceptions.
Yeah, I think our expectations for the future is just a fascinating question. Mm-hmm. Whether you think things are going to get better or whether you think there's going to be some catastrophe, it's a very interesting.
But it's an So back to the book. It's an interesting choice. 800,000 years where,
But it's not as if he just dialed up 800,000. He just kind of leaned on the levers and then watched things go and then leaned back.
Yes.
But I think he
turned out to be.
He also
not the time traveler, but Wells himself, choosing that as a destination.
Yeah.
But he was also referring to evolution, which is probably really hot. I mean, 1859.
Super hot.
Species,
that's it. Yeah, good
30
point.
35 years later, boom. Yeah, you're still talking about it. It's becoming more and more.
That's definitely in the air.
Maybe he felt he needed that much time to have some sort of significant evolutionary change.
Yes, so that he could split the race into two. You would have to. You couldn't go 5,000 years and expect to see anything really.
Yeah. Because if you think like 800,000 years in the past, what was humanity like? Then you're back in the Homo erectus time frame. So the idea of 800,000 years in the future, yes, you could expect some significant evolutionary change.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, very good.
Right.
It was fun. I can chalk that up on my H.G. Wells and maybe. Since we're also familiar with the War of the Worlds between the radio play and the movie and all, it'd be interesting to see what it looked like, from his perspective in 1898.
I'm gonna have to read Island of Dr. Moreau because I don't know.
That one is, and the movie is a '60s movie, and so it is kind of a Frankensteinian, right? So less unoptimistic, pessimistic view of the progress of science. Right? It's like, just because we can do things, is it a great idea to do things? And he's already getting that idea.
Yeah.
And when was Mary Shelley? What was Frankenstein? 1850s, maybe?
1840.
Okay.
1839, 1830.
Yeah.
We did that show.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. How can I not remember? Okay, gentlemen.
All right.
Very good.
I had it in 1820s.
Very good. Cheers.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.